What's up, you guys? I'm out here today at one of the properties I hunted a lot this year. I actually just posted the hunt that took place not far from this spot right now. Almost the most exciting time of the year, second to only hunting season, and that's scouting. We got a fresh snowfall about 48 hours ago, and before it melts, I'm gonna get out here, do a bunch of scouting, and what I'm gonna do in this video is talk about some of the things that I'm looking for. Now is my chance to figure some things out, peel back the layers, and make a game plan for next fall. So before we get too far, I want to talk about why this is such a great time to be in the woods. And as you can see behind me, and you'll see throughout the day, all the foliage is gone. So you can see right through the woods. And while that doesn't always help you figure out where they're bedding early season, it helps you figure out a lot of things in a short amount of time. You can be very efficient. You can see all of the rubs. You can find scrapes relatively easy. We'll see how it is with the snow today. You can find beds, and especially with the snow, you can a lot of times backtrack tracks from a food source directly to the bedding areas and maybe figure out some bedding areas that you didn't realize were there. The other thing I like about this time of the year is there's not a lot of other people in the woods. You don't have to worry about bumping deer to other hunters. This chunk is a piece of private land, and I haven't been out here a lot, even though I've been tagged out for over a month and a half now. And the reason for that is I didn't want to pressure this property and bump deer to other hunters while there was gun seasons going on and muzzleloader season and whatnot. So now that all the firearm seasons are over, I'm out here busting butt. Before we know it, things are going to start greening up again, and this is such a valuable time to learn and put things in place for next year so you can have a successful fall next year. One of the main things that I'm looking for, especially with this fresh snow, that's why I wanted to be out here after the snow, so they had some chances to go about their business, go from bedding to feeding, and then I can see where they've been recently. You can see that behind me. There's a couple of really nice trails intersecting, and if I'm on public land or if this is a new property to me, I'm going to mark all these trails on onX. If there's a spot where a lot of trails come together and intersect, I'm going to mark that, and I'm honestly probably going to find a tree that I can come in and set up on next fall if I didn't have a chance to come back out here, scout later in the year, prepare a stand site. So the first thing I'm looking for is tracks and good runways, especially obviously if you can find a big track and backtrack that to the bed, that's ideal. But for starters, what it's telling me right now is a travel pattern between bedding and feeding. Usually this time of year, that's about all they're doing. They're not running around a whole lot. They're not chasing. They're not seeking. This is the first time I've ever hunted this area. I don't know a lot of the late season food sources, some of the natural browse, the trees. I'm new in this state, so I'm still putting some of these things together. This is a good way to start doing that. So another thing that I'm looking for, again, public land, private land, whatever, and it varies a little bit, but is I'm looking for sign of other hunters. And here I have, all right, it's a field tip. So I don't know what that was, if it fell out of somebody's quiver. It looks like it's been there for a couple of years. This past year was the first year I had this property, so I'm not really worried about it. But if you're on public land, if you find tree stands, if you're finding tacks in the trees, cat eyes, those are things to mark down and potentially try to avoid those areas. If you're on private land, if it's shared access, kind of the same deal. But the other thing to do on private land is to mark if you can see across your neighbors. You see tree stands across the field edge or whatever, mark those, and you can kind of figure out where they're hunting, kind of game plan around that. All right, I might have just put together a big piece of the puzzle. So I was hunting this one specific buck, and he'd been evading me all season, but he was on camera a lot. And I had a feeling he was bedded on this river oxbow, as you can see here. And there's basically crop fields in every direction, so depending on wind direction, he could bounce. But here's this big solo bed, and he's able to basically smell everything coming from land. He's able to hear anything approaching, and it's super thick, so you're not going to sneak up on this buck. And on this side, you can just kind of watch out, and if anything comes, he can just boogie across the river, and he's gone before you even realize he was there. And I see fresh tracks down here in the mud. We'll go take a look at them and get an idea of how big the deer was that was right here, but I wouldn't be surprised if I bumped whatever was bedded right here. So again, I'm going to mark this on onX, so that way I can see what wind direction he'd be bedding here and then set up accordingly. So I might backtrack however far I need to get to be able to hunt this buck. Closer the better, you know, if I could get somewhere within 100 yards or so. The one thing I'm not seeing a lot of in this area, and something I noticed on this entire property, is I just don't see a lot of big rubs. Despite seeing some couple good bucks on camera, I just don't see the rubs. So I'm not going to necessarily sign off an area or decide an area is no good just because there's no rubs. But if there was a lot of big rubs around this bed, that would be obviously a good indicator that a good buck is using it. But it's a pretty good sized bed. It's big and it's worn pretty much down to nothing. At some point, a good buck's using it. There's also a ladder stand on the neighbor's right there. So every time the neighbor comes and hunts this, he bumps this buck off, and that might honestly be to my benefit. He might bump him, and that's when I'm getting that deer on camera, is when this guy's hunting this field edge. He's probably getting pictures of that buck in the field at nighttime, getting all pumped up, coming here to hunt, never sees him. Let's go check out these tracks. Honestly, doesn't look like a huge track. I'm not going to go all the way down there because it's muddier than I expected. I totally would expect, if that buck was in the area, he'd be using this bed. It's one of the best beds I found. Another thing I could do is set up a trail camera along some of the exit routes and then come back and check him and verify if he's actually using this bed. But we're going to keep moving here. I just found another really good buck bed. This one's probably better than the last. I've been working around this oxbow, and basically these bucks are going to bed wherever the wind's directly coming over their back. So as the wind changes slightly, they're going to get up, rotate around the oxbow to put themselves in the most advantageous position. There's no getting in here. It's super thick, so you're not getting in here without them hearing you, smelling you, and then they're able to look out across the river, unless something's coming from the river, which they'd be able to see. You're not getting anywhere close to this buck. It's worn down to the dirt. All the snow's melted out of it, which tells me it's getting used right now, and it's one of those beds where you can tell it's just going to get used year round. I don't know if you can see that, but there's long hair in the bed, and then the rest is in the mud, but you can see short hair as well, which tells me that's their summer coat or early fall coat. So they're gonna be bedding here year round, and I'll turn you around and I'll show you what they can see. They're gonna have their back to all this debris, wind blowing over, and then they're gonna just look right here. So if I was gonna come try to hunt this buck and set up over there, because I'm getting trail cam pictures of him, he's gonna see me. So again, what I'm gonna have to do, let's look at this on the map, figure out what wind direction he's going to be bedding here. That's why I'm going to mark this on onX right now. And I'm going to backtrack and see how close I can get to this bed without him getting me. And something I think is really cool about onX is you can actually take a picture. So I'm going to take a picture of the bed and what he can see right there on the phone. When I open up that waypoint, I'll be able to see exactly what it is I'm looking at. See if we can't find some more. I'm losing a little bit of daylight here, but just found another good scrape. And this is kind of right in the big hub of the property, and this is a place that I'm going to put a camera next year. And what I've found is if there's a good scrape here this year, there's more than likely going to be a scrape there next year. I found like spot on. The ones that I found last year and this time, I came, checked in October, November, and they were tore up. Day 2 out here scouting. I didn't fit quite enough in yesterday, and while the snow is still here, it's gonna melt probably today, and tomorrow we're gonna get a heavy rain. I wanted to take advantage of the snow so I can see as much fresh activity, fresh tracks, beds, and that kind of thing as I can. So back out here, we're gonna get after it, see what we can find. So far, in all the time I've been out on this property, there hasn't been a ton of rubs, and I don't have a great explanation for it. Seems like there's a decent amount of bucks where there'd be enough competition where they'd be kind of aggressive and leaving signage. Well, this is the one good rub behind me, I'll show you. And it's right on this mowed trail. And basically what I've figured out is there's an ag field and then there's doe bedding on the opposite side of this road. So all the does are crossing this trail, this road, and then the bucks, they'll just cruise the road, intersecting all the doe tracks, and they're able to smell all the does at once, scent check, see if there's any hot does. That way they can be super efficient. They're still in quite a bit of cover. They can safely scent check a lot of area in a very short amount of time. Well, I was out here yesterday. I scouted this little food plot I put in, checked a couple cameras around in the area. There's a lot of deer in this area. I just wasn't getting them on camera. I can see the tracks in the snow, and that's why the snow's so valuable. So I brought a couple more cameras to deploy today. Hopefully that way I can get an accurate inventory of what bucks made it through the season, potential targets for next year, and that kind of thing. So I just got a couple cameras up. Got one right here. Just found another bed. It's not super big, but you can see the hair in it. It's hard to say exactly how big this deer is, but mid-size, I mean probably just a doe, and I'm looking for other beds. Typically does bed in clusters. Oh, there's one right there, I think. So more than likely this is a doe bedding area. I kind of suspected that a lot of the season. It's a jungle. It's super thick in here, as you can see. That's why you do it this time. It's a lot easier to navigate when there's not leaves and green everything to try to see through. If you are unsure if you've found a bed, you don't have snow melted in a perfect oval like that, and it's just a depression on the bare ground. A lot of times you can look for hair, and more than likely if they use it at any regular amount, there's going to be hair. So it's just one way to verify that it's indeed a bed. I just came from that other doe bed. Here's a small bed right here, and then about 10 or 12 feet away there's 2 beds. You can see here's depression from her front leg laying there, and there's a bed literally right next to her, whether she got up and rebedded or 2 does were laying next to each other. The other reason why I would assume that, regardless of how many beds I was finding, I would assume that these are primarily does bedding in here, is the fact that there's no real advantage of bedding here. Whereas if you remember the example of the buck bed on the River Oxbow, where they could see what's in front of them, they can hear what's coming behind them, really thick stuff, so you'd have to be crashing through, and then they'd be able to smell you coming as well. So it's really like a foolproof setup. Here it's thick, and that's about all they have going for us. There's not a lot of rhyme or reason. So these does will kind of just bed in clusters and just all face different directions. They're all listening, they're all smelling, all looking around, and they kind of use that safety in numbers mentality, where bucks are more autonomous and they're not going to leave their safety in the hands of another deer. Pretty cool. This is still a good place to mark. I believe that they bed here all year round. It's super thick in here. It's still thick even with no foliage, but this is a place that I would mark and try to set up on the downwind side of, or kind of flank the side of it during the rut, try to catch bucks cruising through. And on top of that, if you lost an old rubber shoe a long time ago, it's right here in this doe bedding area. Shoot me a DM and I'll send you some coordinates. We're gonna keep moving though. Now I haven't found much for buck sign in this particular section, and I'm just picking this property apart. There's big River Oxbows, and this particular one I found all those doe beds. I found some more and a couple nice runways, and I'm looking at the tracks and they're not very big, which tells me these are just doe family groups going from bed to feed. Valuable information. Probably won't yield any shed antlers out of this spot, but needed to do some of this figuring out before too late. Like I said, it's amazing how quickly winter flies by. All of a sudden it's spring green up, you're turkey hunting, you're spring cleaning, going on spring break trips, whatever, and you miss some of the best scouting time in the entire year. Being out in the woods right now, putting in the work right now, is what's going to separate you from your competition. Time to work, baby. Check out this spot behind me. Faces south, and it's pretty open canopy, so it gets a lot of sunlight. So all the snow's melted, and you can see there's plenty of green stuff here. So there's some really heavy trails coming out of here. I gotta imagine deer are bedding nearby, eating this stuff as a winter food source. I don't know what it is, some type of grass and some other stuff in there. But south-facing slopes or south-facing areas, open areas like this, they're all greened up and everything else is brown. I might throw up a camera here and kind of get an idea for what's coming through here. It's subtle, but makes a big difference. Here's a pro tip for you. You got some fresh droppings. If they taste sour, they're doe droppings, and if they're sweet, they're buck droppings. So all you gotta do is eat 1 or 2, and you can figure out if it's buck or doe. Just kidding, don't do that. I'm about out of time for the day, so just to recap, I want to talk about some of the things that we hit on. So for starters, it's always a good idea to get out here with a pretty fresh snow. If you're in an area that doesn't snow a lot, sometimes you got to take advantage of little 48-hour windows like I did today. It's going to be all gone tomorrow, but I got a lot of really good scouting in. It's like a cheat code. You can follow tracks right to bedding areas. Bedding areas change throughout the year, so it's not always indicative of where they are early season or even during the rut, but it can give you a lot of good clues. Next thing, we're looking for tracks, we're looking for rubs, we're looking for scrapes, we're looking for beds, looking for shed antlers. Didn't find a ton of rubs out here, found a handful of scrapes, and I ended up putting cameras on all of those, even this late in the year. Even if they're not working the ground, a lot of times bucks and does alike will still hit that licking branch, and it's a good way to inventory the deer in the area that survived. Now the beds, I marked a lot of those doe bedding areas. I'm gonna come back later in the year and try to figure out what tree I could set up to be downwind of those to catch bucks cruising through during the rut. So if you have multiple opportunities to be on a property, you can do things like that. Otherwise, when you're out here, you want to be marking certain things, certain features on onX, and then physically picking a tree while you're out there in the woods and marking that. Because if I was not going to be back until next year, if this was a piece of public or an out-of-state piece of property or something like that far from home, now I'm depending on just going in blind and figuring out a tree while I'm trying to be quiet, while I'm trying to access without bumping deer, and it's really, really challenging. So you want to do all of that ahead of time, and that's why I'm out here right now. I'm here putting together the puzzle pieces for next season. I got my absolute butt whooped out here all season long, and I refuse to let that happen again. When I have seasons where things don't go well, or when I really struggle, that's what really lights a fire under me to get out there and work hard. So I encourage you, get out there January, February, March, even into April. Get out there, put in the work, so that way next fall you can have some really cool grip and grin photos to share with your friends and family in a freezer full of meat. But until next time, make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to my channel if you're not already, and I will see you in the next video.